That was a close one.
What?
Well, I almost went live without recording.
Oh.
Yeah.
Very close.
Yeah. Yeah, so we don't really have a script for this one. I don't know if you had questions or wrote anything down. Maybe talk about some stuff. And I also kind of have I'm going to target like 45 minutes or so.
Okay.
Let me see.
That,
Hold on. Are we
that should
live on
work.
Twitch?
I do feel a little twitchy.
Oh, we're live on Twitch. Cool.
Look at that.
We're in the wrong format. There we go. That's what we want. Cool. I'll kick off the show then. Or do you want to kick off the show? You kick off the show today.
I don't know. Do I? Okay. Oh, is that how that thing works? Yeah. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the function call. Austin Gill is going to talk about some stuff, and I'm Grant. I'm going to listen to some stuff. This is going to be great. You're in for a treat.
Is that really the best you could do?
I thought it was excellent.
All right. I thought so too. I was just reaffirming that
Your ears turn green when you're lying.
Yeah, well, no, I was surprised. I was surprised. I was like, wow, I hope that is the best because I don't know if I could even handle any better.
They're glowing now.
Yeah. I have glowing ears. Yeah, I didn't charge my other headphones, so I don't get to use this little doodad. Folks that are listening, because this is a podcast show, don't know what this doodad is. I could be talking about literally anything, but yeah, it's my other like microphone on this. What do you call this thing?
I think there's a lot of people who do
it.
podcasts on gaming headsets. It's a thing.
Yeah, I mean it's convenient, right? Because then I can like turn my head over here and over here, and as far as people that are watching the live stream, they're like, "Whoa, he's moving all around," and people that are listening are like, "Nope, sounds like they're just in the same spot."
I can see the utility there. So like when you go on a run or something.
Yeah, because I record podcasts a lot when I run.
Not
true, but I am standing up today. I'm on my standing.
Oh,
setup.
Fancy.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
you're
like
supposed to teach me about some remix stuff today, right?
Yeah. So we're gonna talk about remix. We're gonna talk about a couple of stuff that I've been working on, I guess lately. So I have been doing this live stream for a while, and I have been working on creating essentially like some app that more or less was like designed to interact with a database somehow. So when you're doing database stuff, I mean, literally just about any app needs a database. You don't have to get very far to require a database. But we, just decided going to do something that's like the essentials are create, read, update, delete, the CRUD operations, right?
Yeah.
So my app is just a piece of CRUD, if you want to think of it that way.
Okay.
No, nothing.
I mean,
really?
That's as much reaction as that gets.
No. Fine, whatever. So yeah, it's create, read, update, delete, and it's an app that I decided I was going to try some stuff that I had never tried before. Actually, I decided I was going to try some stuff that I had tried before, and then someone convinced me to try things that I had not tried before. So those included, yeah, those included Remix was the original technology I wanted to use, and then Prisma was the ORM I chose.
Okay.
The ORM someone else chose for me. So I was originally going to go with Objection.js, which is something that I've used. And an ORM is like a tool that you use to connect to a database and can write your queries for you so that you're not like writing raw SQL, let's say. And just kind of makes it, I don't know, more intuitive in the programming language that you work in.
Yeah, it's like an SDK for your data.
Sure. That's it. Yeah. Really good
To use another
explanation.
acronym to describe an acronym.
Yes.
Mhm.
Nice. Nice deflection. That was some good explanation jujitsu. Take their force and redirect it somewhere else. Anyway, so yeah, I decided I'm going to make an app that lets me helps me track all of the pets in my neighborhood because I live in a neighborhood with lots of pets. I think we talked about this before.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, neighborhood with lots of pets. I want to create, read, update, delete them. So I've been doing this with
With pets,
SQL.
it's only a soft delete. You can't. It's
Depends on the pet.
unconscionable.
You can only take so many turds in the front yard. All right,
Ooh, that's
clean that stuff up, Nancy. I see you.
whoa.
Just
Call
kidding.
outs.
I got nice neighbors with nice pets. Really nice pets. Scout, Emma, great.
The best.
Griffin,
I
love
assume
Griffin.
Scout is actually a pet squirrel.
Nope. Scout is a. I don't even know what kind of dog it is. It's a little gray
It's actually a
thing.
large gray squirrel.
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we wanted to talk about today was Remix, and it gets kind of interesting because there's Remix introduces. Well, there's a lot of like things that are nice about when working with Remix that aren't necessarily specific to Remix itself. So it has a lot of overlapping characteristics with other things like React or the web platform or front end or back end development, right? And yeah, the lines really get blurred to sometimes make you feel like, oh, I'm doing this with Remix and therefore Remix is good, or I'm doing this with Remix and therefore Remix is bad. And in reality, it's these underlying technologies that are actually the culprits.
Gotcha. That's
Yeah.
really interesting. I've been writing about like my history and journey as a developer. 'Cause I only started doing this a few years ago. So I've been writing about this, and in that kind of writing process is uh, one of the themes is really learning to kind of discern uh, where I'm actually working, if that makes sense. So you're describing this meta framework remix that uh, that allows you to interface with all of these different kind of platforms or concepts or whatever. And in that wrapper, sometimes it gets confusing, and you think, well, okay, Remix is doing this thing, but in reality, this is a limitation of some other uh, part of the internet stack in general that you're interacting with through Remix. I see this a lot with people interpreting a behavior of React specifically, where they will say React is bad at X, Y, or Z, and it's always like a complaint. It's never like, oh, React is awesome because it does this thing that's actually like just native to the web platform. But like the complaints that I see is always like, this isn't actually React. This
It's
is
JavaScript
this. Well,
or
possibly
HTML
it's JavaScript or
or
it's right.
JSX.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's fascinating. It makes like a very interesting metaphor for something else that I've been dealing with, which is my feelings, like teasing apart what is the source of this and what is the source of that, and what is the trauma and baggage that I'm bringing in, and like, oh, why am I upset today? Is it because I'm hungry, or is it because I got pushed around when I was a kid? You know.
Yeah.
Uh, anyway, uh, yeah, this isn't going to turn into a therapy session. We'll save that for after the call.
Are you sure? I mean, I'm here, man.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
here.
No, no, it's good. I just thought it was funny. So, so yeah, the remix thing is interesting. So let's like kind of talk more specifically about that and not so much the project that I'm working on.
Okay.
Um, so my experience with remix has been a little bit mixed, and I think that's good because I think it's
Do
it
you do that
wasn't a
on
joke.
purpose? Is that
No, it
totally
wasn't.
just
No, it
like
was just mixed.
subconscious?
It was mixed. It was mixed. It's mixed. It's not even the same word.
I don't even know what to do with you.
Whatever. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Let's move on. So yeah, it's like it's a mixed. I have mixed feelings because yeah, I'm starting to see the rough edges, right?
Okay.
And I think that that's important. Like I think people to really to really understand something, you have to know where the rough edges are, right? Because if you're only working in the good part of when it's good, then nothing is perfect, right?
Yeah.
So I'm starting to see those rough edges, and let me like talk through a little bit, try and describe what I think remix is first off.
Go.
Yeah. So like you said, I mean, I'm sure that there's people that are listening that have never even heard of Remix. Remix is, like you said, a meta framework that currently is built on top of React. Now they do want to target other frameworks in the JavaScript ecosystem, but essentially it's like sort of a full stack meta framework. If that makes sense. It handles both server side rendering and the client side hydration
So
of
would you
a
say it's
JavaScript
similar
project.
to like Next.js and Gatsby in that fashion, or how does it differ from those?
Yeah, I would say that the closest comparison I would make to it is something like Next.js.
Okay.
There are some differences though.
Okay.
So okay, cool. So you have a remix app. You're gonna run it. Essentially, it's gonna do like some. I mean, I'm sure it can do like client side only rendering or like static builds or whatever. But you're typing something to. Oh, nice. Um, you can type in the chat, right?
I cannot.
Oh,
It literally won't let me.
okay. Well, anyway,
Well, I was trying to do that without interrupting our flow, but hey, Simon.
yeah,
Yes.
it's okay. Yeah, hey Simon, we got some live chatters. It's great. So Remix, yeah, it maybe can do static site generation. I'm not sure, but I think that it's mostly designed. No, I don't think it does static site generation. I think it's mostly taking the stance of server side rendering is good, and if you want static site rendering or static site generation, you base the platform primitives basically have that built in with caching, either at um, on a server level or at a browser level or at a CDN level, right? Like you can send a response that defines cache headers and can tell something like a CDN at the edge to say, hey, this is a page that doesn't have dynamic content. Cache it for however long you want it to be, right?
Just like Infinity TTL, and then
Yeah, you
then
can.
you effectively have the same thing as
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So that's kind of a different approach than what Next.js is taking, where they're kind of trying to do, what is it, the incremental static regeneration or something like that.
Right.
But essentially sort of the same end result, right?
Right.
You
Yeah.
get a request, you generate it on demand, and then if it's supposed to be something that doesn't change for a while, you can store it in some sort of cache that uh, then gets sent to the user immediately for the next user. Um, so Remix is supposed to support something like that. But for the most part, their runtime is like a server side generation tool. And so far, we're still pretty much in the same boat as Next.js as a comparison. When an app when a request is made to Remix, it falls back to a common practice of, what is it, file system based routing, where you have a root, like a routes directory, and
Right.
anything inside of the routes directory, if it's an index.js file, that is like the file that's responsible for that route at that folder. Or you can have like a folder at like slash about, or folder inside of routes called about, and a folder inside of that called, I don't know, pizza toppings, right? And you can basically construct your application routes based on the folders and the files in them. Also, nothing particularly new that Remix invented there. Um, and they have their own uh, parameters around there, but this is sort of where it starts to get interesting. Is each of those JavaScript files, or most likely JSX files, that correspond to route endpoints, they're most likely going to export a React component that would represent like a page, let's say. So the about would be your React component that represents an about page. Cool? Pretty straightforward there. And here's where it starts to sort of differ, is that they treat their routes like an API. So rather than the equivalent in Next being something like you're going to have routes for your pages, and then if you want an API, you can generate like a different interface for your API, like a route called like /API/users that only returns JSON, right? And then the page that lists the users is like a separate thing
Mhm.
that consumes that API. Remix treats your routes as both the page that generates the HTML and the page that handles like the data fetching for that route. Make sense?
Yeah, so this is, I mean, the next equivalent for this is like get initial props.
Yeah, the server
But
side props things.
right,
Exactly.
right.
Yeah. Okay, so now you have now when you have a page in Remix, that technically is going to fall or be the response to a browser primitive of HTTP request, the GET request, right? If you do a GET request, you're going to get back HTML. But they also believe that you can use browser-based primitives. They have a strong sense or belief in progressive enhancement. So trying to build on top of the platform, like you just keep on hearing those two things in the Remix community: progressive enhancement and platform, like focus on the platform, right? So to do that, if you want to build a route that, let's go back to my example, right? I have a list of dogs in my neighborhood that I'm creating. I
Mhm.
create a page at /create. There's a component that is a form, right? To create a new entry. Now, if I make a GET request to the /create route, it's going to return the HTML for that form.
Mhm.
And if I want to create a new dog, I send a post request to /create, right? And
Gotcha.
I can use that form to submit to its own route. So not like a different API route, it submits to its own route.
Gotcha. And so like I'm imagining building in this, and a lot of like the developer experience comes down to how we want to like organize these projects. So this I'm assuming is all kind of in a single file we're handling, excuse me, or we're able to handle both the get and post request to this API route that also serves uh, HTML ostensibly.
Yes, and it actually goes one step further than that, which
Okay.
I'll get to in a moment.
Okay.
But yeah, you could define your so right now we've defined the first thing that we define is the default export is the component itself. That's responsible for the HTML, right? So in this case, this example, we're talking about building a form. It's a JSX component that outputs a form. And then in that same file, we export a function called the action, an action function. That's the function that is responsible for handling any post request that comes to this route.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, so now you have two exports. One is the default, one is a named export.
Gotcha.
And the action is interesting because it's slightly different than um, how you might design other APIs because we're working with browser primitives, you really only have two sort of HTTP methods you can work with, get and post. So you don't get something like delete or patch or put, anything like that, right? Um, that's one of the sort of kind of weird things about it. And again, when we're talking about what is the cool stuff, what is the weird stuff, how am I teasing this apart? That's actually something that's more specific to the web platform and not to Remix. Remix embraces the platform. Therefore, when they say you should build your API to only support post requests, it's not because they don't believe delete or put or patch is good. It's because they say progressive enhancement is good. And if you want to support progressive enhancement, you work on top of what the platform provides. The platform doesn't provide put, patch, delete, so it provides get and post. So
As far as
that,
the browser specifically is concerned, is that what
yes,
you're talking about? Because I mean,
yes,
HTTP itself obviously supports these other things. That's maybe where I'm
correct,
getting confused. Okay,
correct. Yes, the platform being the browser.
gotcha.
I
Okay,
mean, we're talking web, so web browser. Um, so where am I going next? So we have this data that we're sending, and it's being sent as a post request. Okay, cool. We handle that. In the handler that we export, that's where we might do some database stuff, do some validate, make sure that the new pet that we're creating data looks good, and then if it looks good, we update it into the database, and then we can do something like take the response and return it as JSON. So in a regular post request, that wouldn't actually be very helpful. But in Remix, this is where Remix starts to do some remixy stuff that I'm actually going to circle back on here in a moment when we talk about data loading. So now we've created our pet, right? The form is submitting to the same route that it exists. You define the handler for that action in the same file, or you could define it in a different file and import it, right? But you do have to export it as a named export. That's one of the Remix conventions. And then you have essentially the new data that you've created. Okay, cool. We've got our gets and we've got our posts. So now let's go back to, we have a list of pets, right? And let's say on the home page, we have this new component. On the home page, we want to show the list of all the pets. Well, we need to actually fetch that data, right? And this is where my knowledge of Next.js is not clear. So I don't know if Next, I mean, I'm sure Next kind of does the same things, but because this is server rendered, and because you also want this aspect of like not just server rendering, we want to talk about hydration. Actually, before we talk about hydration, what have we built so far? With Remix right now, we've basically like recreated PHP, right?
yeah,
Like we have
yeah.
server-side rendering, which is great. We've had it forever in all sorts of different languages, right? You have some software that can provide some sort of templating. In our case, Remix is using React for the templating.
Mhm,
Cool, that's good, but that's a React thing. That's not a Remix thing.
mhm.
And then Remix is doing some server-side rendering, which is more of like a node thing, not really a Remix specific thing. Um,
Well, it's
and
probably actually a React rendered a string under the
yeah,
hood, unless
yeah,
they've
sure.
decided to go their own way and do some really hard stuff that they probably haven't done.
Sure. The
Right.
point being that using React to render HTML on the server and then send that to the client is
Mhm.
not something that makes this tool stand out. Okay.
Right.
And we basically have that with PHP or any other sort of server side scripting language. Um, and we have, generate HTML, receive post requests. That's all HTTP. That's all built into the browser. So nothing special there either.
Mhm.
So where it starts to get special, where JavaScript, server-side JavaScript, and these tools like Next.js start to differentiate themselves from tools like PHP or like Laravel or whatever other framework written in different languages, is that you have JavaScript running on the client side and the server side. Therefore, you get the benefit of writing the same language for both server and client, and you can get this idea of hydration, where I can generate HTML on the server, and as part of what I send to the client on that initial request is a request for the JavaScript bundle. So when that page downloads, all the HTML kicks in. It says, oh, we've got a JavaScript file. Let's go get that. It goes and gets that, and then that takes over for the rest of the application experience. What does that mean? It means when you navigate between pages, you're not actually doing like the whole server round trip where the browser, gets a new URL, reloads the page, makes a request for the HTML. The browser has to download the entire HTML document, including header and footer and things that don't generally change between pages.
Right.
You're using JavaScript to just
Client-side routing.
Client-side routing. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Even this, like, that's actually really, really cool. But even this is not something that is unique and special to Remix. So, and again, I think that Next.js probably has this built in, right? Server side render, and then on the client side rendering takes over.
Yeah, depending on how you use Next, it can do that. It doesn't behave that way if you do like a static export. But that's I
Okay.
don't think most people are doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into another topic that actually is specific and unique to Remix, at least in the approach. So now we're back on the homepage. We have a list of dogs that we want to show. Where is that data coming from, right? Because we have this because we have this paradigm where that data has to both be rendered on the initial request on the homepage, but also on the client side, we have to fetch that data. Because if we navigate from a different page using client side navigation, we're going to go to that homepage and we still need to get that data from somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Remix has this concept of loaders. And this is the third export that you do in your route component. You have your component template. You have, if you're going to handle any actions on this page, you have the action export. And then you have this loader. And the loader is kind of interesting because it's also something that is server-side data. So I can say my loader is going to go to the database, grab this information. You can't do that on the client side because you don't have access to the database on the client side, right? So it actually defines the data fetching logic. And then it returns that data as part of this function. And then the next question is, well, how do I access that data from within my component then? And their solution is to use a custom hook. And this is where you get into the remixy thing, is just by having this hook and this loader function defined, I have a way to access the data on the server side when the page is first requested. And then also, when that client side routing kicks in, I actually haven't inspected the response, but it's either generating that HTML also on the server and swapping it on the client side routing,
Okay. So we've
or
got
hold on,
yeah.
or it's either on server side it's generating HTML, and on client side it's generating like JSON for
Yeah.
JSON responses, and then using that JSON to populate the component.
So we've got within a route a default export, which is essentially like the React component that ends up down the line. We have an action named export, which is the behavior of the endpoint if we post to
A
it,
post request.
post request, right? And then we also have a, what's the other named export?
The loader.
The loader, which is the behavior of the client, which if this component needs data on the client, it provides that data via a custom hook.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, presumably
You define it. So this is like in like Redux land, this would be like your whatever store slice logic to like format data coming from in Redux, it's all client side store, and then you have like some async fetching logic. But in this one, it does some magic. So like this is something that's really interesting, because what you're dealing with is, like you were saying, all of these different platforms uh, are involved, but Remix, it sounds like, is very much build tooling that allows you to seamlessly blend those together in a developer experience.
Yes and no.
Oh no.
Because okay, so here's the sort of missing piece. Here's where we actually get into what is the slice of the pie that belongs to Remix, right? Because so far we've talked about making get and post requests. That's on the platform, and then we've talked about like server side generating the initial view, right? That I'm going to give that to Node,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we've talked about, and we've also talked about like templating, right? And that's like React. Like we'll do that React and Node, whatever, on the server side.
Right.
On the client side, we've got JavaScript or client side JavaScript and React for like rendering and even uh, routing, like client side
Right.
routing.
Yeah.
So where like what makes Remix special here is that they actually what makes it what makes it special. I think that the thing that they've got right so far is that they actually create the conventions and the tooling for sort of like blurring the line between server and client side. Meaning, I have one component that essentially, for my sake as a developer, I'm creating one component, and Remix is or like separating that into two, but making it feel like it's one, right? Because you have the client side behavior, you have the server side behavior. Technically, those are completely different, but because Remix is there and like it's sort of this glue that sits in between, as long as you follow their conventions, it uh, it it consolidates that into one experience for you as a developer. And what does that like consolidates it into one experience mean? It means that on the server side, you generate your server side rendered HTML, and then on the client side, you generate JSON and only populate the component that's being loaded there, right?
Right. So
Yeah.
something that so like as you're kind of describing this, I decided to just go look at Remix this package JSON and like what actually are they doing? How is this working behind the scenes? I mean, like it is a large project. It's complex. I know some of the folks working on this. Uh, a lot of them are local in San Diego. This is going to be a difficult thing to like parse out. Um, they're clearly doing a lot of like they have Cheerio in this, which is like, are you familiar with Cheerio?
Yeah.
It's like a virtual DOM parser that
Yeah.
allows you to traverse a virtual DOM. So you bring up a lot of really interesting questions about where these things belong. Um, the question I'm going to pose back to you is, does it matter?
Um, does what matter? Does it matter where they belong, or does it matter as in
Yeah,
it makes a difference?
like who owns it? Does that really matter?
Uh, I mean, yes and no. Yes, in that if you're going to if you're going to have an opinion about a technology, you should know what what where those opinions are coming from, right? Attribute it to the right thing. So if this is like in theory, Remix is made up of like partly platform, partly Node, partly React, partly not even any one technology, but concepts that also exists in other technologies, like folder based routing, right? If I love folder based routing, that's not unique to this thing, right? So
No, it's like the
that's not
platform
the
default.
yeah, it's not the differator, right?
Yeah.
It's PHP has it.
Well,
You
like
know?
it's not even PHP. Like this is just how servers work. I
Yeah.
mean, like
Yeah.
by default, to a large degree, if you
Yeah.
just serve a folder, like this is the behavior that you get, right?
Yeah.
So on one hand, like my question is, does it matter? And like I would tend to agree with you that it probably does matter to understand
Yep.
to a
Also to
degree.
debug.
Oh, good God, yeah, like the nightmares that could come from problems spanning all of these systems. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's bad. But also like one of my problems, and like I was talking about, like I'm in the middle of writing about my history and path as a developer. Uh, Developing this understanding has been something that's served me very, very well to understand, like, where does this problem exist? Is it in JavaScript? Is it in, is it in the platform? Is it, uh, part of some framework I'm working, or some library that I'm working with? Um, but also some of my favorite libraries, pieces of code, technologies, whatever, are very simple pieces of what we might call spaghetti code that just makes it work together, right? And
Yeah.
it
Automagically.
kind of sounds like this is so like Gatsby and Next have evolved into something similar, but their original intent, specifically Gatsby's original intent, was to very much mimic Drupal. That's where Kyle, the original author of Gatsby, comes from, is Drupal land. And so like mimicking that kind of PHP behavior that you keep bringing up, like, was the
I
intent.
mean, PHP is great. Is the irony of living in the JavaScript sound chamber or echo chamber is that like PHP is the butt of a lot of the jokes, but at the end, like PHP is super dominant and
We're
it's
looking for
been working.
parity.
Yeah,
Like,
it's been working great for a long time.
we've made it, y'all. We've
Yeah,
we've
we've
reached PHP parity.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, Okay, so I want to get back to the remix thing, right? Because you do bring up a good point as far as understanding the differences, or like why does it matter who's responsible for what?
Yeah.
And so far, I haven't actually said anything that's like much of a selling point for remix. At least if I was listening to this, I'd be like, okay, yeah, that's kind of cool, but I'm not going to drop my stack
Well,
and
so
switch
no,
over
I
to
don't I
this,
don't
right?
even know. I think you may have already made some selling points there, because my interpretation of this, and I may be jumping to conclusions, or
Well, you also have some familiarity with remix, right? Like you're not coming from.
not really.
Okay.
Like, almost none. I've
Okay.
Yeah, but I think already having a way to stitch all of that together, uh, with little overhead, and that just works when you
Yeah.
deploy it, which is a lot of what I'm seeing in their package JSON, and like a lot of their packages and scripts are around making sure that it works in various deploy environments.
Yeah, yeah, and it is going to be like Edge native support, which is cool.
Yep, I see
Um,
Cloudflare workers.
yeah,
Like, we've got some Edge stuff going on here.
Dino, I think probably.
Yep, yep.
Um, so it's a cool technology. I do want to come around to some of the downsides and some of the downsides. Well, let's do that now.
Okay.
No. Let me finish the thing that I think
Oh,
sets
can I
Remix apart.
validate can I validate an assumption that I made?
Yeah.
So you had mentioned kind of vaguely before, like, oh, progressive enhancement and forms and JavaScript, when it reaches the client, and this sort of thing.
Hmm.
Does that mean when I write a form using their APIs, like, I know they have some very specific form building packages for React, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You use their libraries for that. Does that automatically give me that progressive enhancement experience?
I'm not sure what you mean. Like, are you saying about can you use other form building library like
No, no,
React?
no, no, no.
No.
I'm
Okay.
saying when I use their form building library within Remix Run, and I have it connected through their kind of specific named exports, we've got
Mhm.
the client behavior, the server behavior, we've got the custom hook that comes from that other export, right? So
Yep.
like we've arranged it all in this remixy kind of way. Is the behavior that I get on the client progressive enhancement?
Uh, well, yes, but that has nothing to do with Remix. What you've described
No,
has
no, no.
nothing
It
to do.
absolutely does, right?
Well, hold on. No, yes and no. If you add a form
Mhm.
to your page, it's going to behave like a native HTML form. So even if it's in a Remix app, you add the form, it's going to behave like the platform wants it to, which means by default it sends a GET request to the current route unless you change the method to post, in which case it will send a post request to the current route.
Right.
Or you could define an action to say, no, I want you to send this GET request or post request to one of these other routes. Presumably you have one of those routes defined, and in that route you have defined your action, right?
Okay.
So it will do that by virtue of the platform and the fact that it's like route based or file system based routing, and you have these actions, right? So yes, that will work. Now, when you're saying the progressive enhanced part of thing, maybe you mean like, will it use JavaScript to submit that form instead? The answer is no by default. So if you use an HTML form, it will use a native HTML form, which is actually what they mean by embracing the platform. Like, they don't want to introduce any breaking things to what is already there. And anything that's there that is already defined, they will actually use that and enhance upon it.
Okay.
So this does get me to uh, one of the next points that I want to make, was this like progressive enhancement thing. Is they do have a form component that you can import and you can use as essentially a drop-in replacement for native forms. And if you use their form, then what it will do, and this is the thing that is Remix, and this is something that you can do with JavaScript or React on your own, but they like do this for you, is they will basically give you a form component that is a drop-in replacement for HTML form. It outputs a native HTML form, but it has the event listeners attached to it that will submit that form for you using JavaScript. So that is that progressive enhancement. So you don't get the page refresh. So you do get
Gotcha.
sort of what you're asking for, right?
Right. Okay.
Which is one of the cool things. And the other cool thing about it is when they submit a form, they actually do two requests. If it's a post, they actually
Mhm.
do two requests. One is the mutation, which is the post request that sends the data. The other one, and this is one of the things that is that sort of, I'm going to come back to that sort of glue that blurs the edges between server and client,
Mhm.
is that they will send that request for you. So the user gets a nice experience of, I click, I don't have to wait for a browser refresh. It's actually using JavaScript to send it. And then they actually also follow up with the loader for that route and refetch whatever data was required for that route. And they do the hot swap of essentially refetching the new data for that route and repopulating the current view. So when you hit save, like let's say you add new data, right? We're looking at one of the pets, right? And I have a form that lets me change the pet's name, and on the page is the pet's like name in H1.
Right.
When I change the pet's name and hit save, it's not only going to send that request for me, but it's going to rebuild the parts of the page that are affected by the new data.
Okay, so let me jump in here. I have made some weird mental leaps around this idea. I don't know how ingrained it is with whatever data persistence layer you have going on, right? Like,
So the data persistence generally happens on the back end or on the
right,
server. Yeah.
right. So how aware is it? So if there is a piece of data that is updated in one route, let's say my address, phone number for user information,
Mm.
um, and I update that in one route, but that is impacted across two or three other different views. As I go to them, has it also like regenerated or rerun the actions for those
Well,
routes so that they can be like preemptively cached, or is that like
okay, I see what you're saying.
right?
Well, mm, they wouldn't be preemptively cached. Like, nothing is preemptively cached, right? Because it's again sort of the browser primitive that's like, you don't push something to a cache. You wait until someone gets there. Then if it is going to be cached, I actually haven't gotten to the caching story yet, so
Okay.
I can't answer too much of that question. But essentially, any data that you define in your loader for that route would
Mhm.
be what that route needs. and therefore, if they also have this idea of nested routes, and I haven't gone down that far either. But you could
Okay.
theoretically have like nested elements that are within part of the same like page.
Oh, okay.
Right? So you could have like a dashboard view with a sidebar, and then inside of that dashboard, that's like one view, or like that's like one route. But then
Yep.
inside of that dashboard is like an invoices page, and then part of that is like, I don't know, like a different tab inside of the invoice is like
Yeah, this has
client
been like
address or
a
something. Yeah,
React router feature for a long time. Michael Jackson has
yeah. And he's they're the
it's
people
really
behind
interesting
Remix.
stuff.
So
I've never used routes in that way to like build modular UI
yeah,
using the route that way, but it is like I can see it being really useful.
yeah. So that's interesting. I haven't taken myself too far down that route, but route. Um,
See why I can't ever tell if you're doing it
yeah,
consciously or
yeah.
unconsciously.
That was unconscious, but I caught it. So and
You're still proud of
I was
yourself.
like, yeah, there you go. Okay, so I want to because I'm gonna have to wrap up on time here pretty soon, and I want
Yep.
to touch on this sort of um, last feature that I think is worth highlighting, is that they have this concept of transitions, and a transition is essentially a transition between state mutations. Now, keep in mind that most of the state actually exists on the server. So what corresponds with those transition events or those mutations are any time that you make a GET request or a POST request. And those correspond with any time that you navigate between two pages or you submit a form. So they actually give you access to this transition context. And I use that word context deliberately because React has this idea of context, right? Where I can define context at the root of my application, and then some component way down the hierarchy of components can uh, subscribe or inject that context, have access to that context.
Mhm.
So Remix, that's like I still don't fully understand if that's the mechanism that they're using, but that's the closest thing. That's the best guess I can say is that they have this idea of transitions, and these transitions basically watch your application for any time it's going to make one of these transitions between either a page by navigating or
Mhm.
or like a state transition by submitting a form. And you can actually kind of subscribe to those transitions and
Mhm.
watch what sort of transitions they are. So there's four stages to a transition. There's before anything actually happened, there's like as it's happening, after it's happening, and then back to like an idle state. And I don't know them off the top of my head, so just consider it that way, right? But these transitions also give you access to things like if it's a form submission and you want to see the state, like you want to check that the you want to show the UI based on like if it's just sitting there doing nothing, cool. You can show UI of just like the form, right? And then
Mhm.
you click save and you say, oh, well, while the user is waiting for that request to come back, I want to show the button, either disable it or show a spinner or something like that. You can actually tap into the state of that transition and check if the form is currently in like a pending state or loading state or whatever, right?
Right.
Um, and they actually give you even more details. So you can do what's called optimistic UI, where
Yeah.
if I know that this request, if it completes, I know what the date is going to be. So if I'm looking at a page that's a dog and its name is misspelled, right? I can edit that dog, I can hit save, and instead of waiting for that request to come back before I update the page, I can just say, cool, once the user hits save, I can see the state of the transition and I can access the data from that transition, which is the form data, right? So I can
Yeah.
take the data off of that. I can update what the dog's name is using set state or local state to that component.
Mhm.
I can say, hey, use a set state, and we're going to show the default value of the set state is whatever we initially get back from the server. And then when we make this transition, we're going to change the set state value to whatever was submitted with the form. And then that's all cool. And then you can load a spinner while it's spinning, while it's loading or whatever, or just rely on the optimistic UI. And the cool thing about this song and dance that Remix does, where again on these transitions or when you submit a request and it goes to the server and it gets the data or like sends the mutation, but then that second request fetches the new data and it consolidates back to the UI what the state is according to the server. If the request experiences an error, it will automatically fall back to the original state. So whatever's fresh on the server. So you don't get this weird inconsistency where maybe you've used optimistic UI, but your network request failed, and
Mhm.
therefore what you're seeing on the UI is actually different than what's on the server. Um, and if it succeeds, then the optimistic UI just like reflects what's already going to be the next state of the application anyway.
Yeah, I'd be very curious what they're using for a lot of this.
Yeah. So, I think one of the biggest things that they do is actually mostly around convention. Follow these conventions, and because they've prescribed specifically what a loader is and what an action is and how you use the platform and whatever, that
Right.
allows them to also create these tools that are available for you to make your app even nicer. So now we've gone beyond the benefits of PHP to what is it? The hybrid apps where you have JavaScript powering both backend and front end, and you have that hydration that like says build it on the server, and then once it's on the client side will take over and do the routing and do the AJAX requests and stuff like that. And we've gone beyond that because uh, Next.js had that as well, but we've gone beyond that to Remix also handles these form submissions for you nicely. It handles that consolidation of or reconciliation of changes to the back end that also need to be reflected on the front end. Like it just kind of takes care of that for you. And also like state transitions, things like that. So it's interesting. It's good. There are some things that are not so good. So we can talk about that now before we finish up. One,
Okay. Yeah. Like,
or do you have any questions right now?
so, like, yes, I have so many questions, but the issue comes down to like, well, uh, why wouldn't I? So I want to know how some of this is done, and I'm trying to dig into their code base a
Yeah.
bit while we're talking, and
So
it's
yeah,
not
and
at all what I would expect. Like they're not using some off the shelf state management. Like they have built something bespoke that allows for uh that sync to happen, which isn't shocking knowing who's building this, but that's a huge undertaking
yeah,
to not like throw MobX or something like that at this.
yeah, yeah. Well, and again, the cool thing about this, at least what I think is cool, is when you build it following their best practices and principles, it's going to work even if you disable JavaScript, right? So everything like that concept of progressive enhancement, if JavaScript does fail or the user has a crappy connection or some sort of browser extension that blocks scripts, like it's just going to work the way the platform works, and your API is still going to work because you know that's like the server side thing.
Yeah.
Um, so it's cool. Any other questions? Okay. So where I've found the edges, one, it's a new tool. So some of the things that they actually handle for you are super cool. Like I found that uploading an image was surprisingly easy because handling image uploads in Node is like it's not easy, and they have some built-in tools that are like server-side uh, tooling or whatever that lets you just describe the tell the application where you want to store those files, or if you want to use some third party, where you want to store them. And
Mhm.
then it just handles like naming the file for you, puts it there, and then gives you whatever an object, like the data around what the file details are. And I was like, that's cool. Like I don't have to write that to disk myself. Awesome. Problem with that, uh, it's literally called unstable file upload or something like that, for
Okay.
good reason, because I updated from version 1.4 to 1.6 and my application stopped working, and it stopped working like profoundly. So actually not even profoundly in a way that it blew up, profoundly in the sense of it was actually kind of a subtle thing that was completely broken, but it didn't blow everything up. So
Mhm.
I, it took me a while from after the upgrade to actually like test this one thing in the app, the file uploads, and it's like, why isn't the pet name changing? Like I didn't even include a file, I don't know. So that it's like there are some things that I think that that's an issue that goes away with time, right? I think that
Yeah.
they have a good team of smart developers, and I think that they're good at API design, which is the important thing, right? The developer
Mhm.
experience. Number two is also a problem that will probably go away with time. Is there well, some of the documentation is not up to date with those changes, but their documentation is really not great at telling the whole story around deployments. So they have a CLI that can set up the project for you and can ask you questions like, "Hey, where do you want to deploy to?" And that's a really big question to answer when you're just like scaffolding a project. You're like, I don't know, uh, Fly, Netlify, Vercel,
Right.
Express, VPS, whatever. So they recommend like this like VPS option, right? Or like they're sort of the one that's tailored for VPS. But then the story after you're actually ready to deploy your app and you say, oh, maybe I want to deploy somewhere else is like, cool, go ahead and rerun that the CLI, like the scaffolding CLI, and then
Yeah.
copy over whatever files to your project are different or whatever, something like that. Um,
Okay.
as far as okay, let's say you go the happy path and you decide one that's like I want to deploy to Vercel, and by the end of your project, when your project's ready to deploy, you actually like, yeah, I'm still cool with Vercel, let's do it. That's fine. But if you decide something like a VPS, there's like nothing on how to do that. Fortunately, I'm doing it. The app, like I just got it launched today. It was cool,
Okay.
but it requires like you either got to go like a Docker route or you got to go and like copy your code into VPS and then use uh, what is it PM2 and then get some reverse proxy and something like that. So
I'd be curious if somebody from that project wouldn't want to know more about that and deal with some of the rough edges. Um,
I'm sure they are. I mean, they have like 180 issues open on GitHub right now, so they've got their hands full.
okay.
uh, cool. Well, with that, I don't know. Any more questions from you? I think there are some folks here in the chat that we could maybe take some questions from if anyone
Yeah.
has any. In the meantime, we do generally go at the end of the show to a section um, that I kind of want to rename again and just be like, I want it to be more like appreciations. It was shout outs, which is appreciation, uh, or the gratitude hour,
Okay. A
gratitude minutes,
whole
and
hour.
whole
We're gonna
hour. No,
we're gonna spend another 60 minutes
yeah,
on just
yeah,
what we are grateful for.
yeah. Let's hear some things that you. I mean, yeah, shout it out. Whatever. You got something, or should I go first?
Um, no, I'll go ahead.
Okay.
I like if we're just talking gratitude, I have not been at work eh, like in earnest for probably a month. Um, I've been taking some time off and
Oh, I didn't know that.
I'm really grateful that I mean for the most part, I'm back now as of this week. And there are some things that definitely need attention. Um, but they've been incredible about giving me, the space that I need to deal with some family stuff that's been going on. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, being able to take time off and not really worry about it and not get like constantly pulled into stuff. Um, yeah, I've got a pretty good team around me. It's good.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, I'm glad that you got to take some time off and deal with some of that stuff. I know that we talked about a little bit outside of this. So I am going to take one question that we got from the chat. I'm going
You
to ask it
can't
to you too.
you
I can't
can't
resist that
resist.
one. It's good. What are your thoughts on bun? Ooh,
So I can't grow one. I mean, it won't happen for me.
you can't grow one.
A
Oh, like a
bun.
man bun.
Yeah. I'm doing a
Yeah.
you joke.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I was like bun.
Bun.
Yeah. Bun. I mean, it's too early for me to have any opinions about it. Like, it sounds like a super blazing fast drop-in replacement for Node. Yeah. Okay. Sign me up. Right. I don't think it's going to be that simple. Uh, I think that it sounds like they have some really cool ideas built in that's going to, I don't even think it's supposed to be a drop-in replacement for Node. I think it's going to have NPM support and have several of the popular Node APIs, but I don't
It's
think it's
more than
going to.
that. It has a lot of kind of batteries included
Yeah,
APIs as well,
yeah,
which
yeah. A
seems
lot
really
of
neat. But like, it just like Deno, anytime somebody wants to go non-standard, it, I think Node will continue to set what the standard is, and there will be people who will prefer these like non-standard runtimes, and that's great. It will push Node to continue to grow and better itself. I think it will serve that way. I
yeah,
probably am not going to stray from, even though I would love to have like native TypeScript support and all of this kind of stuff. Uh, like the universality of Node um, and the stability
yeah.
kind of has me locked in.
I'm not. I'm probably not going to try it for like a year. Put it that way. Um, I'm curious. I want to try it, but boy, I have so much other stuff that's like Node's been around for so long and works great. Like I don't honestly for my things, I don't need something that is any faster. Like Node is fast. Node is super fast. Um,
Mhm.
so that selling point is like not super important for me. I don't use TypeScript. That's fine. Um, so I'm pretty
I'm
happy with
glad
where
you
I'm at.
finally admit that.
Yeah. No, I mean I do. Yeah, I use TypeScript. Anyway, I'm gonna give my appreciation for watermelons, summertime watermelons. Mwah, amazing, delicious. We have like a perfect watermelon in the fridge right now. I'm just gonna go crack it open again after this, and
Do
the
you just
new.
like slice it in half and like open it up, eat some with a spoon, and
I
then like
used to do
close it
that.
back up
I live
again?
with other people now. I'm not allowed to do that. But I used to do that. I would do like a whole meal out of half of a watermelon with just a spoon. And I'll tell you what, don't do that. It's not good for your belly. That's all I'm gonna say. Um,
Oh man.
also, appreciation for the latest season of Stranger Things. It's pretty good.
Yeah, we
Pretty
just
good.
finished that last episode. It destroyed me as a human being.
Yeah, don't tell me I'm on the second to last. So
Okay, okay. Really, it holds up. I'll just
yeah,
say that.
it's good. Cool. Well, that is the show. Thanks, Grant, for hanging out as usual. Thanks for listening to me yap about this thing that I'm kind of excited about. And yeah. And thanks everyone for that hung out in the chat and was on the show. We are going to take a couple of minutes after we stop recording to hang out with y'all and all of you people that are listening in on the podcast. Love you. Leave us a review. Come back. Tell your friends, and maybe catch a live show sometime. All right. Cool. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
There it is. Okay, that is going to be it for the recording. Thank you all for hanging out and chatting. Sorry for some of you first timers that didn't realize this was a podcast. Nice, your first live one. Yeah, this is pretty fun, huh? You don't get this part in the podcast. So
Yeah, slightly more incoherent babbling. It's
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, and delayed responses to people chatting.
That's true.
So it sounds like you've got a satellite delay on the phone. Yeah. I actually don't have a ton of time because I
You
am
gotta
going to go
go.
play some kickball.
Ooh,
Yeah.
like a 9-year-old
Oh no,
out
I'm
there
going to play
playing
like a
kickball.
full-grown fucking adult. I'm going to play the shit out of kickball.
You bringing some brass knuckles? I'm a little concerned for the other team.
No, I mean, not like a yeah. I'm not going to hurt anyone unless they get in the way of my savage kicks.
That's right. So
Um
somebody had asked about my niche grinder. It's pretty good, but this is the Atom 75, and it's just much better. Um, they're both great, very capable grinders. If you're a coffee nerd, um,
so we're on the internet and I
mhm.
totally read that comment as like just terrible talking crap. I thought they were saying this was like a niche grinder like the app, because they were like, oh, it's two dudes with hair on their face talking. Nice niche grinder, bro. I was like, and then they explained, no, it was like a coffee grinder. I was like, oh man, it shows you how much time I spend on Reddit. That's terrible.
Oh wow, that
Yeah.
makes me so happy.
Yeah. Well, they, but that's the world we live in. There's mean people online. Fortunately, this person was actually not mean and was actually quite kind.
Yep,
I mean, not that
that's
there's
so
anything
good.
wrong with Grind or anything, but
Oh, I mean, a
shit.
really niche grinder. That is kind of an
I
insult.
mean, well, regardless, like shit talking is shit talking, even if it's a lame, even if it's like even if you're not good at shit talking, like, come on,
Yeah,
don't bring
yeah.
that sort of,
Niche
don't bring that
grinders are
sort of
not like
attitude
my
up in
level
here.
of shit talking where like you think about it for a minute and it kind of makes sense, but it's just not that good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's good shit talking when you make the person have to think about it and like have to wonder if they should be upset or not.
And then they're more upset that they thought about it and it was
Yeah,
so lame. They're like, this is such a waste of effort to even try with you.
yeah. I should probably stop before I get myself in trouble because we're live streaming still to like several different platforms.
Okay.
Oh, anyway, we're here for the good stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm tweeting niche grinder with the correct spelling.
Uh, wait, how is it not spelled right? Niche.
Grinder is spelled with no E when it's the app, right? It's
Oh,
GRINDR.
yeah, 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 yeah. No,
Right,
they
right,
spelled it with an E. That's also a good hint that it was a legitimate, nice person comment. Man, I'm terrible.
right.
All right, well, I'm gonna hop on my bike and go kick some balls around.
Do it.
Yeah, thanks, Code Thin. I got that. Picked it up. Oh, everyone's. I really feel like last horse crossing the finish line, but
Is it familiar, the feeling?
uh, but no, it usually feels like uh crossing the finish line, but not realizing that I'm the last horse. So yeah.
Now I'm lost. I don't know what you're talking
Never
about.
mind. There it is
Have
again.
have fun, kick some balls.
All right,
We'll see you.
folks. Thanks for hanging out. I'll catch you next time. I will be on for my normal stream tomorrow, 1:30 p.m. Pacific Standard. All right. See y'all.